chatter in the news and on social media about vaccines, infectious disease experts worry we're entering a new era of illness. So today on Across the Fence, we're separating fact from fiction and getting expert guidance about protecting your and your family's health.
Hello, Vermont. Before a measles vaccine was released in 1963, nearly all kids got measles before they were 15, and about 3 to 4 million Americans were infected by the disease each year. 400 to 500 people died of it, tens of thousands were hospitalized, and each year about 1,000 developed encephalitis, or swelling of the brain. In 1978, the CDC set a goal to eliminate measles in the U.S. by 1982. Between vaccine improvements and widespread vaccination, we reached that goal in 2000. For more than 20 years in the U.S., measles and the accompanying deaths, hospitalizations, and complications was considered eliminated. Now, it's back. And with an outbreak quickly spreading through South Carolina, most experts believe the official announcement revoking our elimination status is imminent. How did we get here? In part, that's what my guests today are here to talk about. Dr. Benjamin Lee is a pediatric infectious disease physician at the Golisano Children's Hospital at UVM Health, and Dr. Beth Kirkpatrick is a physician trained in infectious diseases of adults. They're both on the faculty of UVM's Larner College of Medicine and conduct research with the UVM Vaccine Testing Center, founded by Dr. Kirkpatrick in 2001, and the NIH-funded Translational Global Infectious Diseases Research Center at UVM, currently led by Dr. Kirkpatrick. Dr. Lee and Dr. Kirkpatrick, thank you very much for joining me today. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Dr. Lee, it's nice to have you back. Last time we were here, we were talking about flu vaccines.
That's right.
I did go and get a flu vaccine this year,
Perfect.
so I will tell you, I was a compliant
Great.
listener.
All right.
Let's hope that we can kind of do some more clarity building about vaccines today. What is going on with vaccines in the U.S.? I mean, has the evidence changed? You know, what's happening? Either of you.
I would start by saying the evidence has not changed.
Yeah.
And I think in the 20th century, vaccines were thought to be the most important public health advance. And that's still true. Vaccines in general are a fantastic way to keep individuals and populations healthy. So the evidence has not changed.
Mm-hmm. And the efficacy hasn't changed either. In
No.
fact, it's only getting better, right? Yeah.
In general.
Well, are they safe? I mean, people may have heard, we have even had members of the administration blatant, like saying unequivocally that they're not safety tested. Is that true?
That is not true. And so we can definitively say that vaccines are safe. They have been extensively safety tested before being made available for public use. And so it's very unfortunate what's happening now, because a lot of the discussion and rhetoric is simply not rooted in fact.
Yeah, not rooted in fact, and it's spreading quickly on things like social media, where people are hearing people who are not coming from a medical background saying that they are not safe.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's fair to say that the information coming out of some of the federal government right now really runs counter to what most physicians and public health professionals believe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, and so then that's what we're going to talk about then, about what's going on with schedules. So let's talk about kids and vaccination. So folks may know that the CDC recently narrowed the vaccination schedule. They reduced the number of the universally recommended. So I know there's a lot of terminology here. Universally recommended vaccines from 17 to 11. So what does this mean?
So what this means is that there are a number of diseases, so 6 specific diseases that we used to say every child should be protected against, that now they're saying, well, maybe it's not as important anymore. And even if that doesn't result in any changes in the ability for people to access vaccines right now, it's really just casting a lot of doubt and confusion on the safety of these vaccines and their importance. So, ultimately the concern is that if people stop vaccinated against these diseases, we're just going to see a resurgence of them.
Like we have with measles.
Exactly.
Right.
Measles is a great test case. It's the most infectious pathogen that we know of. So any change in vaccine coverage, you're going to see the effects quickly. And that's certainly what we're seeing. But what we'll see with any of these other vaccine preventable illnesses is as fewer and fewer people are getting vaccinated, the numbers are just going to go come back and go up.
And that idea about, so universal, like the universal recommendation, that was something I'm thinking about when I would take my kids to the doctor. And those are the ones that they, in order to go to school, in order to have childcare, those were the types of things, those vaccines, you had to have them. So when they say they're no longer universally recommended, does that mean now it's supposed to be a conversation with, it's like it's up to the parents to decide?
Correct.
Okay.
And so on the surface, that might sound like a reasonable approach, but really what it's doing is it's causing confusion and uncertainty and casting doubt on the safety of vaccines in general. And unfortunately, I just think it's incredibly unfair to parents and families who are looking for solid, clear guidance, which unfortunately we're not getting anymore from our federal government.
I do remember that helpless feeling as a parent when any decision that was put upon you, that you're like, I don't know. I'm not the expert. I would like the expert to tell me. So what has the response from pediatricians been to this change in the schedule?
Well, I think to reiterate what Dr. Kirkpatrick had just mentioned, in the medical community, including here in Vermont, there has been no change. All of us here in Vermont in the medical community, pediatricians, family medicine, internal medicine, et cetera, stand united in our conviction that vaccines are safe and effective, and that we will continue to follow the previous vaccine schedule. So the American Academy of Pediatrics has come out with their own recommendation that I believe should be the schedule that folks should look to going forwards without the changes recommended by the CDC.
And this in Vermont has even escalated to the level of a bill making its way through the legislature, is that right?
Correct. So before in Vermont, immunization recommendations were basically tied to the CDC recommendation. Currently, at the state level, there are efforts to sort of shift that authority to the health commissioner, who will follow the guidance of local medical societies and professionals, such that Vermont will officially set its own schedule.
Okay. And in part, that's to also ensure that Vermont has access to vaccines.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. Okay. And then Dr. Kirkpatrick, when we were talking, so we had, we always do these little pre-talks, and when we were talking, I said something about, gosh, there's no schedule of vaccines for adults, and she gently corrected me. No, there is. There is indeed a schedule of vaccines for adults. What should adults be getting, and what are the benefits of continued vaccination for adults in the population? You work mostly with adults and older adults.
That's right. So, the schedule for adults, we don't talk about it as much because the schedule for children is so compressed and so exacting and so targeted.
And you think of it as the
specific
milestones of going to the pediatrician and getting the different shots, right?
Right. Well, you think you spend a lot more time as an adult than you do as a child in general. So the adult schedule has a lot of, if-thens in it. It has to address pregnant women. It has to address those who are immunocompromised with special medical conditions. So there indeed is a schedule, but it is a little bit more, nuanced, I would say, than the pediatric schedule. And it includes things like the influenza vaccine, the COVID vaccine, but also things like the zoster vaccine, the shingles vaccine, and then the same one we now give to children, the respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV vaccine for older adults. And a few that then have sort of various recommendations depending on risk.
Yeah. And RSV is not new for adults, but has it only been since like 2023? It's only been a few years that it has been kind of promoted? Yeah,
just a few years for adults, and now actually the age of recommendation is coming down a little bit because we find that it is a very common cause of severe respiratory illness in adults, and one that actually can be linked to impacts on your health over the long run. So
and so now let's talk about that, because there can be also positive impacts on your health in the long run for vaccination. There's more studies that are coming out that are talking about, like, I think they call them off-target benefits. People may have heard some about that.
Right, so the idea here is that vaccines may benefit your overall health in addition to preventing or decreasing the severity of a specific illness. And the example that's in the media a lot right now is the link of the shingles vaccine with decreasing your risk of dementia. And what they did is they combined a whole multitude of studies in a single analysis, and actually there's been many studies done showing those that have received the shingle vaccines are at a substantially lower risk of ultimately receiving dementia. And the idea is that having an infection and ideally preventing it with vaccine, having the infection, so it's sort of a cascade of inflammation that can then sort of, damage things over the long run and exacerbate other conditions you might have. So there are these sort of just general benefits to health to not having bad infectious diseases, essentially.
Okay. So I think fair to say, bottom line, vaccinations are beneficial for both individual and public health. So how do you respond when people say things like this year's flu vaccine wasn't particularly effective and that means I don't need to get a flu vaccine?
Well, flu vaccines in some senses are a bit of a special case because it is true that for flu vaccines it is still possible to catch the flu afterwards, but what's often missed in that discussion is that the severity of the illness is significantly reduced. So a lot of times for individual vaccines, really the question is what is the purpose of this vaccine? And we know for flu vaccines it's not going to prevent every infection, but it will prevent many. And for those who do get infected, will significantly reduce the severity. And for flu, there is the additional question of whether or not the match for any year is going to be a good one, and some years it's better than others. But even in years where the match is not as good, it's been demonstrated over and over again that there's a clear benefit to getting the flu vaccine.
So it sounds like one of the things that we should keep in mind is that one of the things that vaccines are very effective at doing is, even if they do not completely protect, they don't provide an entirely prophylactic effect against illness, they can reduce the severity. And that sometimes that's what we're also thinking about is we want to decrease hospitalizations, we want to make sure that people don't miss as much work or miss as much school. And so all of these are reasons to go ahead and get the vaccines.
Absolutely, and a perfect example in my mind is the rotavirus vaccine, which is one of the vaccines that the CDC has removed from the recommended universal list. It didn't cause a lot of pediatric deaths in this country, but before the vaccine was available, up to 70,000 kids would be hospitalized with it, and millions of ER or doctor's visits. And so here we're not talking about preventing kids from dying, but preventing severe illness and hospitalization, which I think for any working parent would say that's a very important thing.
A very important goal. All right. So lots of information in a too short amount of time. If you want to learn more about vaccine recommendations for children and adults, here's a few resources for you. Dr. Lee and Dr. Kirkpatrick, thank you very much for coming in today and lending some clarity to a very important topic. Really appreciate it. And as always, Vermont, thank you for learning and exploring with me today. And thanks to the team that makes Across the Fence possible. I'm Amy Finley. This is Across the Fence. Come back and let's learn and explore again tomorrow.